Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Tooele Happy Hour starring Jared Anderson and David Weiss, where if head trauma had a podcast, it would sound just like this. Today's guests,
plural.
We have Rob Axson. He is the Republican state chair for our wonderful, glorious GOP, and Holly, who co-hosts the Tooele Happy Hour whenever she wants. So,
invitation.
Rob, you're brand new to this, right? This is your first time as chair.
First time as chair. I did serve as the party vice chair a few years ago in the previous, well, not the most recent. Yep. Not the most recent leadership team, but the one prior to that, I was the party vice chair. But yeah, party chair as of 2 weeks ago.
Robert Anderson?
Axson.
No, who you served under.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, that was when Derek Brown. When Derek Brown was party chair, I was his vice chair. And we had to navigate the joys of COVID and all of the nonsense of that.
That was crazy.
Yeah. Crazy times.
But you've actually experienced the biggest nightmare that a party could ever go through. And you guys did an awesome job. I mean, we had an online convention that went, I know it didn't go smoothly on your end, but as an attendee of said convention, it was extremely smooth and it felt effortless. Like I was
There's a lot of work that went into that, and we were certainly proud of it, but it wasn't ideal in the sense that like we missed out on caucus night, things that are important. We missed out on the in-person aspect, which is always going to be the preferential approach to how we engage with one another. But when law was saying we couldn't meet, there was nothing else we could do, so we pivoted.
Man, I mean, that was extraordinary, especially it got us into technology really quickly. And for a lot of our delegates who may not have been familiar with something like Zoom and things like that, it was really cool because, I mean, we even had it as an option for our state central committee meetings. And some people, like I've had to go out of town on emergency, and yet I can sit in on a central committee meeting, state central, and vote for my county and represent my county.
Yep.
I don't love it. I like in person better.
Yeah, in person's always better, but it's nice when we can utilize technology, not as like a plan A, but as a plan B to still augment. Like you said, when you have to go out of town. I know while I've been on the state central committee, I've been in person in every single meeting, except for one of those did fall on a family reunion date when I was up in Montana. And so it was nice that I was still able to participate and engage. Montana. Oh, it's beautiful.
Hey, Rob, it was a close race for you, but I voted for you, just so you know.
Hey, I'll take it. I appreciate it.
I did too. I feel safe enough to say that I voted for you.
No, I love it. I love it.
Now, nobody ran against you, though, right?
So there was somebody in the race initially, and then they dropped out. And, you know, luckily who I was running against was a good guy. I consider a close friend, and we had a great time, and he'll still be involved in the party. But yeah, once he dropped out of the race, it made the conclusion of the race all the more certain. However, I'll tell you, in those handful of weeks from when he dropped out of the race to when the convention was, I didn't slow down. I traveled all over the state. I continued calling as many delegates as I could, meeting with them in person, because political parties are at their best when they actually facilitate the involvement of as many people as possible, buying in and sharing their perspectives and sharing their talents. I mean, heck, you guys have talents and ideas that I don't have. And what a shame if, as a party, as an organization, we're not creating a space for you to step up and help accomplish everything that we need to accomplish. So that's always going to be my goal.
There was one criticism I can definitely give for the Republican Party conventions. Now, when we're there, we're voting, and they're like, hey, who thinks this? Who thinks that? Hold up your IDs, right? You get a visual consensus of who's voting for what, but there's really no record of how the delegate votes. There's really no actual quantitative number of what the vote is for a lot of those issues. And I was thinking, you know, a lot of people are talking about these apps they want to develop for the party. And we just had a guy on who's developing a political app, and I was wondering if maybe you've heard anything that's coming out and upcoming for delegates to be able to cast their vote and actually have it recorded somewhere digitally.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And we have these two kind of competing pressures that are happening. You have the crisis of confidence that's happening across the United States with Republicans and Democrats, but just among Americans at large, about the integrity of the election system.
Right.
And so that's always going to be the counter that some folks will have before they feel like the elections, whether it's within a party or for a party position or an elected official, until they have the utmost confidence in that, some people can be hesitant to embrace new technologies, new opportunities. And so I'm all about leveraging technology to be as efficient and effective and engaging and collaborative as possible. We just need to make sure that all along the way, we can definitively and demonstrably show that it is transparent, it's fair, it's verifiable, so that we always are actually adding to the confidence in our election system at the same time. And I don't think those are mutually exclusive.
No.
It's just that there's two different priorities that we need to figure a way to bring those both together.
If I could add, if you remember convention, right, the argument over the ballots, paper ballots versus technology, even the clickers, that was a long argument. And even though Carson kept it, within the limits and confines, there are so many people right now, especially that are afraid of technology where your vote is concerned. And they want that paper ballot. And it does make sense, but then you also get the option to vote anonymously.
Yep.
And not be counted.
Why do we want an anonymous vote for the state delegates?
I think because you're in your county with your peers, and you don't want people to either praise or yell at you based on your vote. Not that that doesn't happen. Everybody sees who raises their hand and who doesn't. And I know that because I feel like a spotlight is on me nonstop when I'm at convention, because they want to see how I'm voting. And there are certain things, for example, the precinct choosing and delegate allocation. These things affect the party more, and they're my job working with you at the state to have these things done. And a lot of the members of my county don't understand how it works and why certain people are asking for these certain things. So I voted against a lot of my own county on this because I want to be able to allocate my delegates. I also know what precincts work, what don't. And some are new and we need to keep growing. And these numbers, we're on the numbers nonstop, and our county clerk is phenomenal. She was a member of our leadership team for years, and she's always been behind the scenes as a mentor to me, explaining the data.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand the data and how it's allocated. And I think it's a double-edged sword. You look like you're favoring a certain precinct because they get more delegates, and yet some of these precincts, you're lucky if 5 people will show up to caucus, even in a presidential year, because it's so small and so new.
Mm-hmm. I do think right now the state central committee, all of those votes are public, and people can look and see how those votes go. There can be a discussion as to whether we want to do the same thing on the state delegate front. That would be a decision to be made by the state central committee and what we do within our bylaws and whatnot. Once you're elected to represent somebody, I think there's a case to be made of your vote being public.
Yeah.
However, I will always be one to believe that the anonymity of the vote when selecting elected office of individuals when they're voting for, their senators or local representatives, that has to be anonymous. We have to be in a place where people can comfortably vote for who they feel is the best person without threat of that being made public. But once you're elected as a state delegate or something else, again, there could be a case to be made that should be public.
Question, can you imagine being in my position as a state delegate and a party chair and voting for specific candidates? And it's a public vote. Everyone knows that I voted for Spencer Cox, for example, and the half of our county that's not happy with Spencer at any given time then becomes unhappy with me. And yet I voted the way my neighbors wanted me to vote, because I do my due diligence. I reach out, I give them all the information, and I try to vote the way they want me to vote. But it does affect people. It can affect them. And then the non-anonymity to me is preferred.
Well, yeah, a public vote is fine until you have a contentious race. And if it gets real contentious, especially when you're voting against your neighbors, you want to make it private.
Is that
So I
like
guess
a backhanded slap that you vote against your neighbors?
Well,
Your job is to vote with your neighbors.
let's say that there's the smaller the election, the more important anonymity is.
I think so. Yeah.
Whereas say, a presidential election, God forbid anyone still gives a shit about that. But anyway, say a presidential election, you're voting against someone, and averages state vote against states, especially where it's filtered through the college. And then on, where that's a federal election across all boards. And then when you get into say our federal senator and congressmen, for a senator, we'll be voting against Salt Lake County. So it's not our neighbors, a mountain between us, people, but when you're voting for a neighborhood, you want to keep that especially then anonymous.
Well, especially when we're selecting our state delegates. Like if I have an option with 2 state delegates saying, I will vote anonymously, and the other one says, I will vote publicly, I'm going to vote for the person who has the courage to put their vote out there on the table
and back up what they believe.
And I feel like I, as a citizen, should have that option within the party. And I feel like the delegate should also have that option. So I guess if there ever is some sort of a social media delegate voting platform built, maybe they should have the option to say, I'm going to vote anonymously or publicly. But somehow there just has that feeling like we need some sort of way to actually track the numbers.
I hope that we get enough activity that our state delegates are, if not elected in by their values, by their friends and neighbors, they at least meet with enough of their friends and neighbors to get a tempo that they vote for what their district wants.
Well, think about this. What you're talking about is at the very heart of what makes the caucus system work. Mm-hmm. And when it's at its best is when people are accountable and engaging with and working with their neighborhood. And so to your point, it's not just Utahns representing the issues, it's your neighborhood. It's literally the street that you live on and the folks you go to church with or go and see at the grocery store. It's the same people that you see at parent teacher conference night with your kids at the school, because then you make sure that, Tooele is represented on the discussions and that the folks that you care about are articulating the issues that they care about. I think that's a great service to any eventual nominee.
100%.
And a wonderful opportunity for any elected official. And so that's something where I'm a big, strong proponent of the caucus system, and the Republican Party at large in Utah is a proponent of that system. However, I do believe that we are substantially short of the potential we have as a party in regard to creating a compelling system, educating and inviting people to participate, providing a platform and an understanding of when it is, what is a state delegate, how do I run to be a state delegate. So these are all things that a well-funded, strongly organized party with a vision on how to execute this can actually help elevate that. And so that's part of why I felt compelled to run, is to make sure that the state party is doing all of those things necessary to significantly increase turnout into our caucus and substantially increase the number of new Republicans and former Republicans and current Republicans coming in and participating with us. I'll tell you what, like young people, I know it's easy to write them off and say that these are folks that are voting liberal and voting for the other side. That may be, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
It's just we're not showing up consistently to educate them and to invite them to add their way of thinking and to provide their input and their ideas. So very much looking forward to that. Another factor of something that we have here in Utah, look to my left, Holly here has been a fantastic county party chair. And yet, if she were to be honest, and I asked the question of how helpful has the state party consistently been, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I also don't want to put you on the spot. So I'll assume what her answer may be is very similar to other county party chairs. And that is that the state party has been occasionally helpful. Just occasionally. I believe that the state party is best when it supports and it facilitates our 29 county parties to come to the table and execute what they need for their communities. And that's what I'm looking forward to do with Holly and the other 28 counties and their leadership teams.
Yeah, good point. What I mean by let me ask Holly a question. Holly, how many delegates for our last election became delegates because they were the only person from their neighborhood who showed up?
A lot.
And that's what I mean by they become delegates by default. Hey, you live in this neighborhood, here you go. I can't do it. I don't care. Here's your pin.
Well, like he says, the state party helps us a lot, maybe with signage. We need to get the word out that when caucus is. We talk about technology. How great would it be to make it very easy to attend caucus and to
I don't think it's all on you guys.
People. Well, no, you're right.
How many people just like, I'm floating.
Jared, many people don't even understand caucus, and even Republicans in the state don't understand caucus.
Yeah.
And why I think I was so excited when you were running, and Mike Bird too. You both had you don't have a job without caucus. I don't have a job without caucus, and the responsibilities we have is to just build our party. And like I told these guys before, my job I have to keep people together on that 80% because they have parts of the system where they divide in half. And I've seen it with my own eyes. And the last thing I want to do is get rid of anybody that doesn't believe in this one issue. We've got to bring everyone together and let them sit at the table with their free thinking ideas. That's the beauty of our party, is we're all free thinkers. We're individuals with an individual spirit and desire and how we want our world to be, right? And everybody's vote is important to us. Young people to attend a caucus, I force my children to go, and they're probably bored, but they have to understand the system. It's Civics 101. And we're a private entity. We should be able to choose our people the way we want, but we have a system right now that can use some updating, bring us into the 21st century. Advertising is so important, but it's so expensive. And both of us run off of budgets that is donated money. And so we have to be extremely careful with how we spend other people's money that are trusting us in that aspect. But I've got to get the word out, not only to get people to caucus, but to get people to vote. And I live in a county where we've been able to sweep our seats since I've been in office, where all our seats are red, but I can't take that for granted because more and more people are moving here. And a lot from out of state, they don't understand caucus, what delegates do, what the state central committee does, what I do. And the more we can educate them, maybe the more excited they'll be to participate. Because it's a lot of fun being a delegate. It's nice to sit down with a governor potential and look in their eyes and ask the hard questions and have them give you a response. And they know they've told you what their response is. They know it's documented. They don't have to do that with the masses when it's after the primary, but they've got to do it with state delegates. My job as a chair is to make sure every delegate's getting in front of these people. And so we have to develop these smaller networks and grow them out to get people involved. And you guys were with me in the last election, and these meet the candidate nights I set up, and how many will show up? How many take their job as delegates seriously? They don't understand it, that it's super busy right after caucus up until convention. And then they get to lay low for a while. Or do they? Or should they?
Well, to that point, I think there's an interesting opportunity that we all have. Of frankly being grateful for the country that we live in. And even with all of our challenges and some of the headaches that we're dealing with and some of the places where we're falling short, we still live in a country that allows for me to be who I want to be and affords me opportunities and freedoms that we don't see by and large throughout history or throughout the rest of the world. And so if we can connect for people political participation on caucus night as a delegate, or even just as an attendee to caucus night, is a pretty small price to pay in a sense of gratitude to make sure that we're still exercising our constitutional republic and being grateful for the system that we have. I know people will sometimes say, oh, caucus night, why would I want to go to that? That's 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours of time. Frankly, 3 hours of time once every 2 years is a pretty small amount of time that I can express gratitude and make sure that we are exercising our freedoms here in this country. And the consequences that will come of us just using that as an excuse of saying, 3 hours is too much time, I'm going to stay at home and binge watch something on Netflix. You're not contributing to our country watching on a show on Netflix, but 3 hours of participation and the example you are to your neighborhood and to your neighbors and to your kids, I mean, that could be transformational for our country moving forward.
Well, and your voice gets heard, even if you're not in an elected seat. You get to sit in that room with the person that's going to represent your voice. And that's why not just attending caucus, but getting the email of whoever your state delegate is and tuning in. I mean, in my county, we do a lot of live events, and thanks to you guys' help, we're able to get even more of our candidates up in front of an audience and hear if they're talking to their delegate. Me as a delegate, I send out an email to everyone. I have a Facebook page for our precinct. I try to give them all the information I can. Many people don't even reach out. And yet it's their voice that I need to hear so I know how to vote properly on their behalf. Because that's really what my job is, isn't to be my opinion, what I want. It's me informing my neighbors what I've learned from this candidate, pros, cons, in my opinion. What are your thoughts? And this was a big deal when Orrin Hatch ran the first time. I ran and some guy said in the meeting, are you going to vote for Orrin Hatch? I want him in one more time. And I said, we hadn't even interviewed him yet or anything. And I was running for delegate. And I said,
Orrin Hatch ran the first time or the first time you ran?
so when I was a delegate.
I was about to say,
I wasn't born yet.
they let you vote in 18 whenever?
They let me vote before I was born.
Yeah. That's like reverse Chicago voting.
I was twinkle in my dad's eye at the time.
Someday there will be a voter. They vote Democrat.
The dead vote for the Democrats and the unborn vote for the Republicans.
There you go.
Which is kind of prophetic.
But that was the thing. They wanted me to vote for Orrin Hatch. And I said, well, I would be happy to do my due diligence. And at the time he had a Lindquist running against him. I was pretty hard on both of them. But at the end of the day, I thought Orrin Hatch one more time. And I reached out to everyone, and everyone in my neighborhood was like, we want Orrin Hatch. So I said, okay, but he has said this will be his last time running. I don't know that I'd vote for him again, but I will do the will of the people. Lillianquist actually, I went after him regarding the state retirements, and it was for law enforcement and firemen and teachers, and he changed it. And I was very pregnant at the time, and I was just, my name got known really quick because I had just thrown him out there, and I was like, answer to this. This is crazy. I know police officers are hurting, and now they can't be police officers when they retire, whatever. He gave such an excellent answer. We can't afford it. And if we want to have money in the coffers in 10 years to give these people, we've got to budget. We've got to change the system. He wasn't wrong. As bad as I hated it, he wasn't wrong. And I put all of that when I gave my reply to my precinct. I don't know if anyone listened. I just know they said, we want Orrin Hatch.
You can't be more honest than that. I mean, if you think back to George Washington's day when the troops were ready to revolt against the newly found republic, we couldn't afford to provide for them what we promised. And George Washington just came out and said it to them. And hopefully, I guess that's what saved us. A good, honest, solid answer like that. And, Lillianquist delivered.
That and a whiskey tax, maybe. But anyways, we don't need to talk about that. We can talk about the bonus army. No.
There's that history I was telling you about. Well, I was going to add to this. When Orrin Hatch was fishing to run again, after that, he said it would be his last time.
Was it his last time?
He talked about running again. That was the big thing, is he was starting to do the feelers, and state delegates were feeling it. And
problem
my
was he'd come back to Utah and didn't recognize the place.
Well, the neighbors that I had that were big supporters said, no, we wanted him one time, last time, no more. And I was able to reach out to his team and go, look, it's not looking good here for you. You promised.
And I'm not going to say Hatch was a bad senator.
I miss him already.
I think Hatch was a big government Republican of the past. I don't think Hatch would survive right now. Not in the Republican Party, not with this. The Republican Party has become a party that tries to live up to Reagan's rhetoric, if not his actions.
Well, I think there's another component to this too. I look back, I graduated from high school in 2001 over in Utah County. And what was it? Were we $4 trillion in debt?
Right.
I think we were about 4 trillion. You were what? 2004, 2005 is when you graduated.
Right.
What month is it?
You look at it though, we were $4 or $5 trillion in debt, if I remember right. That might even be high. We were even closer to 3 trillion. And yet here we are now, and they're arguing on whether or not to raise the debt ceiling beyond the $31 trillion. And so you have a senator like Senator Hatch, when you're governing a federal government that it was still, compared to today, far more limited and restrained than what we have now. I think you can play around the edges of somebody who is playing with the ideas of big government, but in conservative ways. Nowadays, to the point of what we were kind of talking about, of honest conversations and how important those are, we don't have any money. We don't have the means to keep kicking this can down the road. And frankly, Chuck Schumer is old enough where he may not be alive to experience the consequences of their nonsense. But my kids certainly will be alive. Yeah. I'll be alive. My grandkids are going to be alive.
Yeah.
And that's what terrifies me. That's where like the differences between the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, in my mind, are more starkly clear today than they have ever been in my life because of the nonsense of what we've seen come out of Washington, D.C.
If I can be harsh for a second, both party is guilty of this.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Every president since Clinton has doubled the debt. And when I say doubled, that's a hard inflection to grasp, but we went from 4 trillion and closed out on 8 trillion.
Yep.
Under a Republican president. We went from
with a war that was going to go in for another 20 years
to 19 under the Democrat. And then from 19 in one term to, 31 under a Republican, or no, to 29. And
that one didn't quite double, but it was still dramatic.
But it was on the, it would have doubled.
Yeah. And that one, you have COVID, but like, that's my biggest criticism of the Trump presidency is they absolutely positively were implementing good conservative principles on the one hand and spending money like Democrats on the other hand. But to your point, the Republicans and Democrats are to be blamed. But at least from the messaging perspective now and the principles of our party, and I'm not talking about just the party of who's elected officials. I'm talking about those of us that I don't have a vote in DC, but I have a vote here as a Utah Republican. We believe in fiscal restraint. And we're going to fight for it.
States need to wrestle it back. And I want California to be able to do all its purple-haired kooky shit it wants to do. Because in 20 years, when I retire, I'll move to California and start a new game show called Flip This State. Because it'll be in crumbles and it'll be, it'll be like a house flipping show. But I'll
ripe bananas.
But no, states need to start wrestling back. We need to have and this is a movement that is particularly viable for you guys where you're on state and county level stuff. We need to get the parties to focus on their state delegates first. That needs to be, everybody needs to be concerned about their state rep and then their state senator. And then if they have a little extra time, worry about their state congressman. And then maybe their federal senator. And the president shouldn't even be a concern. Because if we turn over to where states, we need to revert back. We need to forget that Abraham Lincoln ruined this country. Sorry, everyone. And he made it to where it used to be those United States. We were plural. We were 50, well, at the time, what was it? 38 separate little nations that were in a union versus everybody cared about who got into the White House. All the focus,
a lot of power went to the federal government, taken from the states.
Yeah.
Well, and I say if we had 50 Ron DeSantis's in this country, running the states, there would be no need for the federal government except for our military. And
I like
if
that
states took
Vivek
full control.
Ramaswamy. That's the cat I'm looking at right now.
He is fascinating. I've been watching a lot of the stuff that he's doing. We have, and that's a nice thing. In the Republican Party, even right now, we have a number of declared candidates for president who are providing compelling arguments as to why they should be very closely reviewed and considered. And we're going to have a handful more. And so my commitment to Utahns is that our Utah Republican Party is going to work our tail off and make sure that we have the data, the structure, the vision, the plan in place, the funding in place to be a value added to whoever our Republican nominee is for president, to get them past the finish line. And most importantly, everybody down ballot from that, to include the folks that you're talking about, our local state reps and our state school board seats, and all of these folks who are going to go about it in the way of limited government, because this government that has grown so large and so expensive, we know that the shelf life on this is coming due fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so we have to reinvigorate those principles of federalism that you're talking about. And you're exactly right. Pre-Civil War, people would identify, by and large, if you look at their writings, as it's like, oh, I'm a Virginian, I'm a New Yorker.
Yep.
And second, it was, I was an American.
If you went to England, where are you from?
No, I'm from Virginia, I'm from Utah, I'm from wherever. And yet nowadays you identify yourself differently. And while as a patriotic American, I can get behind that, from the perspective of our constitutional republic and how our government is structured, we are best served when we look locally and we empower our state identity and our local identity within that. And the federal government is merely the space where those states created the federal government. It's not the opposite way, right? I mean, the federal government was created by the states. We need to get back to that space so that the federal government is the space for our state to articulate its perspective, but we are a sovereign state that has the ability to dictate the decisions for our own community.
Yeah, we need to lean on that 10th, the 9th and 10th Amendments.
Yep.
I want to say that if anything I learned during Trump's presidency was that it not only showed us the Republican and Democrat leadership in DC is very much the same. Hard to tell. But it also showed us those who stood up and agreed with his policy that were about the conservative values. And I'm not talking financially, because I'll use Mike Lee as an example. He wasn't ready to get behind Trump on his infrastructure bills and things like that were just ridiculous spending. And then it trickles down to states and state contractors and all this other stuff. It's good for our state, yes, but it's expensive. And in your house, you have to run a budget and you might have debt. Well, you run your budget based on your debtor and what you owe. The government's just the opposite. Hold on, I'm not done. Yeah. And this thought is, when these certain policies came out, I think true conservatism in the GOP started to shine through. So we not only got to see the candidates that would vote with him, it's our party that failed him. It's our party that made most of his executive orders have to come to pass to get these policies through, because his own party wasn't prepared to back him. Well,
in a lot of ways, I'm thankful that his party didn't back him on some things, because where would we be financially? The issue with everyone looking to a single person savior, and where Trump wanted to leave this awesome legacy behind by this infrastructure bill,
right?
Because Obama had one that helped out a lot of coastal cities and helped out a lot of laptop class. None of it filtered to the working class, not one dime of it. But he still sings his praises on CNN and wherever. And he's going to be written up in the history books as, oh, he did great things. He comported this much money into the economy. It all went to one sector and didn't bleed out.
It's wrong. It's how much money the federal government puts into our economy.
I know, but
that's so
Trump
bad.
Wanted that, and I'm glad Mike Lee became a honest and caught shit for it. How about Thomas Massey catching shit from Trump?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thomas Massey, Trump called him out personally when Thomas Massey's going, do not shut our economy down for this disease. Do not. I was calling out 3 years ago, this COVID shutdown is going to cause another depression.
Oh,
and we're on that cliff.
Think about this. You have, and Senator Lee, for full disclosure, I used to work for Senator Lee up until earlier this year. So I had worked for him for a number of years. So I got to see firsthand a lot of this stuff. The whole time he was in office up until last month, I worked for him. And during COVID, he was one of the few who was saying on some of the relief he supported initially, especially where the federal government policies were closing down businesses. You need to then step in and fill some of that gap for businesses. But when it kept like one-upping and, oh, let's add these additional benefits, he was one of the few that was saying, okay, guys, we've gotten this out of whack. We now are going to pay people more to stay home than they were getting paid to go to the job that they now can't
And it was
go
unaccountable,
to. You have to cap
unedited,
it off
audited.
at least at that space. It doesn't make sense to incentivize the lack of work. And what I find to be incredibly sad, if you remember the stimulus checks, and obviously there's going to be some folks who needed it, and I'm not going to argue that. I'm not talking about the individual cases. But if you're looking on the macro level, whatever dollar amount was just deposited to your account without you wanting it. And on the surface, you may have looked at it and said, oh, this is nice. I can now pay for some things. I've got some surplus money. Yet the inflation that has come over the last couple of years as a consequence of that type of nonsense has wiped out whatever benefit came from that. And yet people have this disconnect and they might not remember. Instead, they're like, oh, I liked it when the government gave me money, not realizing that inflation is the government stealing money from you without you recognizing it because of their failed policies.
It's not free money. And honestly, if they would have focused on empowering the citizen in other ways, it's financial, and the government produces nothing, they sell nothing. We are their product, and here the product is asking permission for so much, and people have it out of whack. Their thinking is that, albeit the government is going to take care of me, the government should be taking care of me. I've given this many years. I mean, we have to pay Social Security. We don't have a choice in that. Yet many of us will never see a dime of it. And we have to come to terms with that. And no, I don't want to cut Social Security or veterans benefits, nothing like that. But I certainly want it budgeted, and I want them to cut some of these other bills that are just Ukraine.
Oh, excuse
There's
me,
an
guys.
unaudible amount of money. They're getting another $2 billion. I mean, this is a blank check to a government. Now we have paid more than their GDP, more than that country's GDP. We have given them for what? When our veterans, and they're threatening to cut veterans benefits and all this. That's not what Republicans are doing. They're saying, look, this is our debt. That veterans benefit is number one on our debt. We owe it, and Constitution says so. We have to pay our veterans, and we have to pay our military budget. Those are required by the Constitution.
I think,
look at all the other funding that could be cut.
I mean, if we want to go into the Constitution doesn't authorize an army.
Okay, what?
It authorizes a Navy
providing for the national defense.
This is national defense, right?
It's supposed to be renewed. What is it, every 160 days? If I'm correct.
On the War Powers Act on certain things.
To have an army, to have a standing army has to be reauthorized.
No, I'm not sure on that front.
I think it's every 180 days, something like that. But it authorizes the Navy because the Navy is large structures. Maybe you could argue an Air Force would fit under that because, we have flight now. But
it's nice to hear you say something nice about the Air Force. Kind of. Speaking of veterans here.
Yeah.
Love it.
He knows what's right.
I know, right? But no, I like to look at it that, hey, they have the best lunchrooms. I like to look at it as, in 200 years, are they going to read about you like they're reading about Nero or Marcus Aurelius? And when these Republicans are up there screaming for pump more money down, you look like Nero.
Yep.
Or worst case scenario, Caligula or Crassus.
Okay, do you have something in your throat? You just...
Well, you know what? I ran the numbers on our debt. If they say it's what, 32 billion, trillion?
Trillion, yes.
That's what they say. I mean, everyone's always honest about what they're spending. But with 333 million citizens paying that off, we could each pay $3,000 to $4,000 every year for the next 30 years. It'll just be like an extra mortgage of some type, and we could get rid of the debt.
It's a hell of a mortgage.
Yeah, but you're counting children.
Yeah, and fetuses, yes.
Yes.
So how do they pay that?
We have to reduce the child labor laws. But
there we go. Imagine how cheaper mining would be if the tunnels were only yonder.
They're small little stature.
Just little tunnels. We'd have to redo the rails, baby shovels, maybe pickaxes, maybe dynamite teams.
But in all seriousness, these are the numbers we're looking at. Yep. If you got kids, you got 6 kids, you got to put them on your account or something. But if you do not want if we're all moral and we love our children, because that's what moral people do, they love their children, they don't pass intergenerational debt. These solutions to cut the spending, we're just reducing generational debt. But if you want to get rid of that debt, then we got to start buckling down, and we got to get charged as citizens a bill. Yep. You go to dinner, you don't go to your waitress and say, my grandkids will finish the debt after I pay a few dollars for your tip. No, we have a bill. And if we want to do the conservative thing, we need to pay that off.
I've had this argument with you before, because that again puts me in the defensive, because I'm saying to myself, I didn't spend this money. This money was spent on things I had no control over. The government went on a rampage of spending. I have no control how much money they're sending Ukraine. I have no control how much they're spending on special programs. Yet I'm going to go into debt trying to pay the government's debt back off. And if they're not willing to cut programs, even programs I enjoy maybe, which I don't know what those would be, but if they're not willing to cut and start making severe cuts on programs that everybody's used to and loves. I mean, you even bring up even auditing Social Security and how it works, or saying, you know what, no more Social Security from here on out. The rest of you will get this amount of money you put into a bank account for your retirement, and you will take care of yourself. That you'd never get elected with that, because people are terrified to lose what they're already getting. And that's Social Security. People had no right or choice to pay into it. Yep. That is their money. They should get it. But then if the government doesn't say, okay, we're not going to play in that purse anymore, we'll keep Social Security in its own budget and we can't touch it. That's something. Every person who pays into it gets their money as needed, and the government's not writing a blank check every single time to these different programs. But until those programs are cut, programs you don't agree with, I don't agree with, but they are what the government thinks is important, I'm not paying their bill. I didn't order the steak and lobster. I ordered a salad. And at the dinner table, I'm not going to be the one who pays for your bill and your bill when I have my own bill.
I would say this is one of the reasons why it's so important for every Utahn, every American, certainly everybody here in Tooele County, to be paying attention to what it means to believe in and adhere to constitutionally limited government principles, and what the difference is between a democracy and a republic, and all of those things that every American, regardless of how much or how little education they had, by and large back in the day, understood the basics, at least, of that. And we've moved away and we've kind of dumbed it down and we've hidden our own history. And the consequence of that is you now think that the federal government's responsibility is to be that cradle to grave caretaker of every aspect of your life. And this may be an oversimplified analogy, but the federal government is merely a larger example of like a homeowners association. You defer to this group, this organization that you have allowed to be created to do certain things that you as an individual homeowner can't do, whether it's, take care of that park or build the fence around your neighborhood or have that guard on the guard shack or pay the pool cleaner to come and clean the pool.
Or have that neighbor who's got the car on blocks to get him out of there.
Take care of that. Whatever that homeowners association's limited role is. And I think by and large, homeowners associations at times get a bad rap because they overstep what is appropriate. And yet at the same time, by and large, Americans have been okay with the largest homeowners association in the world overstepping its role and authority time and time again.
Not always. Those that generally weren't okay with it, there was a group that was burnt in Texas. There was a place that was bombed in Philadelphia.
January 6ers, they're still in prison.
So it's not that it's the part is it's not that you're okay with it. What can you do?
Totally. But this is where, again, my invitation goes to every American, because you have certain people that then become the scapegoat on trying to articulate their freedoms, because by and large, the masses are not aware of what's going on.
Right.
And this is the consequence of years and decades of our public education, for example, moving away from teaching civics. And now we have, even in higher education, theories around different definitions of every single word in the book. And yet there's no real compelling reason to provide a fair argument about political discourse. that is a
frowned
way.
upon.
It's
You're,
frowned upon
you're
because
censored.
this is an active, consistent, and by some people, I think, an intentional effort to hide away the reality of what this country is, was, and could be
Right.
from people, and disconnecting them from the role that they have to play. And so that's where I believe political parties, what you do here on the county level, what I do at the state level, where we can reach our best potential is to try to bridge that gap again.
Yeah.
Even if I disagree with somebody, if they're more moderate or more conservative than I am as a Republican, as long as their intention is to build a strong party committed to our founding principles in this country, I want to afford them the ability to be engaged in
Right.
that process.
Under the same tent.
Yep, same tent and a fair, transparent process.
Yeah, and I'm a government employee, and I know, and I've also worn the pickle suit for years and years. In the military and in the government, it's frowned upon, and in fact, they punish you if you talk politics. And I know they have their purpose, but sometimes I feel as though the country as a whole, from some sort of autocratic perspective, doesn't want the population to talk about politics.
Oh,
Do you ever feel that?
I mean, they
100%.
used to be, you couldn't talk about religion or politics, and your grandparents said that's it. That's not polite. Don't talk about politics at the dinner table in a group setting. It riles people up. And yet I think that's it. I mean, we've got a federal education board basically who's telling us how to educate our kids and what values we have
And
here in
they're
Utah.
completely successful at it.
Yes, it's by
The
design.
numbers
This
have
is all
not
by
dropped
design.
every year since 1972 when they were formed.
If I go to a party and I bring my wife, the first thing she tells me when we get in the car, don't you talk politics, dude.
And then the first thing she does when you get to the party is
Who voted for Trump?
she's the one who talks politics. Well, me and David, we talk tactile stuff. She's all about Trump.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to push back on that. And I know it's been an analogy and counsel that we've received from our parents and our grandparents. And I think maybe initially when it was, hey, don't talk about politics or religion, that was okay back in the day where we all kind of agreed, at
Right.
least upon the structure, even if we
Super
disagreed.
fine differences
Right?
back then.
Well, yeah, the Democratic Party, like if JFK came back today, would
He'd
you
be a
recognize
Republican.
his party?
No, he'd be
How
with
about
us.
Robert Heinlein,
How about
I don't know
him?
who
Did
that
you just
is.
make that name up?
Yeah.
the guy who wrote Starship Troopers,
Still,
a Democrat senator from California,
Well, he'd probably be one of us.
who in his books, you got The Moon is a Cruel Mistress, Starship Troopers, I forget
see
the
what I
name of
mean?
the other one.
Well, Trump is a Democrat from my perspective. He's the
From
best
our
Democrat
childhood.
I've ever voted for.
But
He was one right before he filed to be a Republican.
Heinlein was he was an anti-communist Democrat, hardcore. Truman, what would Truman be?
Oh,
today?
100%. And that's the sad reality. And so the counter that I would push is I actually think it's okay to talk about what is at the core of your beliefs, whether it's religion or or politics. And instead of hiding from it, I just would love to be in a country where we were filled with a bunch of Americans who could have civil, respectful discussions about what they believed. Because instead of like shying away and like hiding, like literally my faith formulates so much of who I am. My political opinion formulates so much of who I am. And so if those are just suddenly topics that are out of bounds, how well do we actually get to know one another?
Right.
And yet we're trying to solve complex issues that our country is facing, and we don't even know how to talk to each other.
Well, look at the reaction though when you are honest, especially for conservatives, is they get. I mean, if you now that we have social media and everyone's opinion matters, or at least they think they do. You even say the wrong thing and you are blacklisted, you are canceled, and yet that's just it. I can sit down with a Democrat willing to have a conversation. We can leave the table in disagreement on the ideals, but I don't have to hit below the belt ever. I don't have to be personal. I don't have to swear at them. I don't have to belittle them in any way, and I certainly don't have to throw the table up and destroy everything. I had a family member that was a Democrat for many, many years, and Thanksgiving dinner was always exciting because she had no fear in sharing her beliefs, and I didn't either. But what I did is I got to learn what the other side is thinking and the mentality behind it. And it's not a selfish, the Utah Republicans and Democrats, Democrats are not these insane, angry, selfish people. Their thoughts are with good intentions. Their intentions are good, but they're not following the idea through.
I almost
they
think
don't see where the money comes from.
Are in your genes, your age, and your profession.
Those definitely factor.
I mean, you read Jonathan Haidt, and he lays it out. Your baseline beliefs are genetic. There's something that's in you from childhood, and they stay there.
Right, but it's also when you've got a family. My parents took me to vote when they voted. My parents involved me, and they always talked about politics. It wasn't frowned upon in our family, and I think it's what gave me my foundation when I got to college, so that I could stand up for myself and my beliefs without fear, even though I did want to get the best grades. I was adamant about getting the best grades, but my father would always say, no grade is worth your integrity. And that is what you never give up. So if you write a paper and they tell you write about something you believe in, don't write what the professor's going to give you the best grade on. Write what you believe in and do it well and be able to defend it.
Man, I wonder if you could do that nowadays.
That's the thing. It's totally changed. So now the thought isn't you can't talk about religion and politics as long as you are in a differing factor of what their religion and politics is.
As long as you agree with me on all of these.
Right.
How rough would it be
They've
to be a
stopped the back and
Democrat
forth.
right now?
Now it's threatening if you don't agree with them.
Imagine being a Democrat. 3 years ago, you're like, all right, we've got gay marriage. Okay, we're in a safe place. And then they pop up and say, we want to be able to abort them when they're 6. And you're like, oh, shit. That's what I got to do now? All right, fine. All right, I got to keep up with this to keep. And then they're, we want to cut
you
off our
vaccinating
stuff
your
and
6-month-old
become something else. And oh, really? This. How many people have to be running away from the Democrat Party just because the Democrat Party seems to be on a forced march to insanity?
Yeah. Well, look at the Forward Party right now in Utah. They're actually expanding, and where'd they come from? I have no idea.
I think they're soaking up independents because the Forward Party has no standard message that everyone adheres to. So you can be an independent, you're trying to run or trying to support someone who's running. They jump into the Forward Party. So 1, they get ticket access, and 2, they've got some kind of backing to maybe get them a commercial put out or something else, which is what I think. And I'm not saying that's bad at all. Where the Forward Party doesn't have the Republicans tend to have a message that is a fiscal responsibility.
Small government.
Small government. I mean, I would
Individual
love to
rights.
see any Republican live up to that. The last person to live up to that was a Republican. Thank you, Eisenhower.
But you don't see what's happening on the state level when Carson Jorgensen as chair. I mean, there was a lot of things that budgets had to change, responsibilities had to change, debt had to be he didn't want debt. And we had just come from Derek Brown, who also did an exceptional job, and your team then.
I would argue the Republicans in the state have done very well.
But I'm saying these party organizations on the state level, like you said,
there are some places where
are well run.
I think the Republicans need to do a serious look at some of the intrinsic things that are already there, like the BATC. That's something to look at, to where do a study. Does this cost the state money to run? Does it cost it to operate? Is it a surplus or a bonus to operate? How does that ledger up? Because one, I kind of feel like if you want to be honest about conservative values and prioritizing what's responsibility of government, is that a responsibility of government?
So little is. It's up to the people and their local leadership.
That's the question. So the Republicans on things like that have let it slide because it honestly, it's a moral positive. And so they've kind of been able to let it slide as the state diversifies, because I don't know, states like California are hell bent on becoming empty wastelands. And everyone leaves there. The state's going to diversify on its mentality. I do think the BATC is not going to have a choice but to be questioned in the next 10 years, like hard questioned.
Here's a nice thing, though. If you look at the Utah Republican Party platform, there's nothing in there that prevents you from making that an issue that you want to engage in, or supports the other side, or vice versa. And that's the nice thing. The Utah Republican Party platform, and anybody that's listening to this, I encourage you to go to utgop.org and read the platform. You'll see that it's quite a unifying document. And to all of those Democrats that you just mentioned, who are probably terrified of where they see the march of their party going nationally, go and read our platform. There is space for you here in the Republican Party, especially as you adhere to this belief that the government shouldn't spend what it doesn't have, that the government shouldn't squander and mortgage your children's future, that you should have individual opportunity and accountability, and that all ships can rise as we fight for the opportunity that rises the tide. 100%. That's the party platform of the Utah Republican Party. And there's room for people who have been Republicans and Democrats and disengaged politically. And so I would invite everybody to come into that space. That document is unifying. And in that, you'll see people that have their pet issue or their one or two things that they really care about, but we unify around the platform. We'll have a couple of things here and there where you and I may disagree, but we can unify around that platform.
Yeah, I've been looking around. Does the Democrat Party have a platform?
Yeah.
They
But
do.
theirs changes. Ours very rarely changes.
What is-
Ours is simple and constitutional and moral, and it's open-ended,
It's
so
beautiful.
people can be individuals.
It really is. You read it out at the Lincoln Day dinner, and I was like, that's when I said I want to see the Democrat. And did they draw theirs out on a whiteboard? Or
they definitely have a lot of scratch marks and eraser marks, I'm sure.
I think so many Democrats, like you said, that couldn't go along with the crazy. I mean, they have been, the neighbors I know that are Democrats, they have been good American citizens who just want better for everyone and equal opportunities and all of those things. Their intentions are all great. The thing that this new stuff that's come through, they can't go along with it, and they're not going to be Republicans. They know better. But here's what I'm saying. I think they disengage totally.
Yeah, I think they check out. They move to independent. Like I did a job at a lady's house a couple weeks ago. Older lady, Stansbury Park. She's hardcore Democrat, but just talking to her, I'd go Socratic. Well, explain that to me. And to watch her twist into knots to try to explain abortion at 9 months to me. Mm-hmm. And the only excuse they have, well, if the mother's endangered. Well, explain to me
that's less
the
than
abortions that happen
opportunity.
outside of that.
Yep.
Or explain to me, explain to me parents being able to sign a medical circumstance to their child that's going to irrevocably destroy their child's adulthood, and how parents can sign them up for that. Or explain to me why a teacher can get between a parent and a child for that 1 year or 9 months they spend with that child, that can destroy the rest of that relationship that's going to last however many more years with that parent. The teacher gets to hop in, shake the brand new baby full of sugar, hand it back to the parent, throws up on the parent. The teacher gets to skate.
Well, while saying things like we've seen and heard anecdotally, and we've seen on video, instances where
I think that's the main.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Instances where teachers have specifically said, "Don't talk to your parents. Don't trust your parents."
Right.
I mean, what a shame. What a crock. That it just.
Well,
it cannot
administrations at schools, I mean, where your child is wearing a dress at school, he's a boy at home, but he goes to school and he can be himself, and they tell you you're a terrible parent, when yet, why haven't you brought this to my attention, number one? And number two, why are you deciding who my child is? I've known him since birth, and he wanted to be a pirate for 2 years, and I didn't cut his leg off, give him a hook on his arm, and cut his eye out. I didn't do that because he's a kid.
Yep.
And how do you know better than me? And then you get into this when they're legislating things that ever get in between a parent and child. And I know not every parent is perfect, and I know there are absentee parents, but this is
those are small, few and far between. By and large, most children will have no better ally or champion than their parent.
Right.
And where that is not the case, luckily there are grandparents and neighbors and community organizations and churches that can sometimes fill the gaps. And still there will be some that fall through the cracks. But those few falling between the cracks, let's figure out how to help them,
Right.
rather than destroying what every other kid has of a strong relationship with their family, with their community, with their neighbors, and most importantly, with their parents.
I agree. The family unit is key. And I think it's been by design that the family unit get destroyed. It happened so badly to Black Americans when new legislation came out and dividing their family. And they used to have the strongest family structure.
Oh, there was so much to be learned from the African American
Amazing.
community with families. Like you go back to the 1920s and the rates of success within those families, and yet the outcomes that we're seeing now are very different from that. And what a shame and what a malicious lie that was sold
Absolutely.
to them. And I mean, it's
Design.
by design. Absolutely.
And it's happened to all races. It's get in there, got out of school, get individual. You have these teachers who are now, they're not just advocates, they are activists.
Yep.
And they
Question mom and dad. They don't love you.
question the authority. We love you. We're here for you. We're listening. I'm a mom. I'm always listening. And whatever my child is going through, I want them to be happy. I want them to live a life that isn't going to be painful and destroyed in a second. But I also know best. I'm their parent. And that just it's been influenced now, and that's why I want the government out of education. As far as, I mean, I see what they're doing in Florida with DeSantis, and they're now going to have legislators choosing curriculum and going back to the way it was, where the state is going to decide.
Because they're accountable on the local level.
Yes.
To the voters, to the moms and the dads.
That small group of people who pick that legislator, that House
Far
representative,
more
and that
accountable than
senator.
going to DC to talk to some bureaucrat in the Department of Education to try to get changes made.
Or go to
I
their
would
local
say bring
school boards.
bring it further. School boards, yes.
100%.
The local school boards are the most local as you can get for a school, and that's where these things should be decided.
agree more.
But like you said, a lot of people are slipping through the cracks with these broken families, and it does feel kind of like the government's sticking a crowbar into the system, giving a little wedge, and whispering, "The government loves you."
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids do flock to this government light lantern and find themselves hypnotized by this statist religion these days. And I'll be honest, when I went to the convention, I saw a lot of seasoned individuals and very few people my age.
Yep.
So you've got a job to do. You've got to get out there and maybe somehow connect with our generation.
So here's what I'll tell you on that, friend. This will be a key priority for my team. Here's a nice opportunity that comes. I'm the oldest member of the leadership team. So I'm almost 40. So as the party chair, almost 40, our party vice chair, mid to late 30s, our party secretary, mid 30s, our party treasurer, late 20s. So there's an opportunity that comes there. Not that we will have all the answers on how to talk to millennials and Gen Z, but we'll understand it maybe a little bit better than people older than us. So it's a nice bridge between the generations, because we have to solve how to onboard and bring young people into the party, because it's for the success of their future and their opportunities. And frankly, Utah, we have the youngest state per capita in the entire country. And so if we as a Utah Republican Party can't figure out how to connect and resonate with young people, it will affect us sooner than any other state.
And we can't dismiss young people. And we also haven't, I don't think.
I don't think we have.
We're
but we
teaching them
can step up.
ourselves as parents at home, in our homes. But I think it's an awesome reflection, the leadership team that we have. It's a great reflection of the fact that we have young people in this state that are taking on issues and believe still in the platform, in the potential, in the future. And the future doesn't look great. It doesn't look great. And we still have young people willing to go, you know what? I'll do it. I'll change it. I'll be the change. And yet our country was founded with people that age.
Yep.
Our founders were young. They weren't these old men you picture in your mind. I mean, 40 was like old.
Super old back
Well,
then.
some of our founders weren't even legal age to buy a drink. They were very young. Yeah. And you had to grow up a lot sooner back then. We are definitely on silk slippers these days. These generations might slip. Absolutely. And I do fear that, as they'll be changing my diapers. But hopefully we're going to make a big impact. I hope you're very successful, Rob. Is there anything closing you want to say? Because we do have to wrap up the show.
No, the quick thing, first off, thank you for inviting me out here to chat with you and to engage with folks here in Tooele County. The critical thing for all of us is to realize we all have a part to play in building what we want our future to look like. And I want to be focused on 10 and 20 year horizons. I don't want to worry about just winning next year's presidential election or the election after that or the election after that. If we instead hold to those principles and the platform that we believe in, focus on what success looks like 2 decades from now, we will win elections along the way. We will bring young people along with us. We will introduce the party to former Democrats and to minorities and everybody in between. But you have a role to play with us as we build the party. So keep an eye out for the caucus that we will be having next year. So early spring, we don't have a date set, but we will have a date set within about a month. We will get word out on that. Come and participate with us at caucus night. And before then, be in touch, utgop.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our guest, Rob Axson. And also, don't forget to go to our YouTube channel and TikTok, press subscribe, give us some numbers. Let us validate our existence is real. And with that, I will leave you with another great episode of the Tooele Happy Hour. Thank you for tuning in.